Skyline asked if she wanted me to read the bio, and I was like, I forgot what I wrote, and I completely forgot that that was at the end. But I'm glad. I'm glad to be reminded of my terrible fandom. Hey everyone, thanks for having me here. I am here tasked today to kind of talk through screenwriting things. As she mentioned, I am an assistant professor of screenwriting and producing at Western Carolina University. We teach several screenwriting classes there. And I think how I approach screenwriting largely comes from my graduate degree at DePaul University. So I'll probably reference a couple people that I learned from when it comes to screenwriting. Now, I know there was a panel earlier today, I think at noon, about stories that sell. How many of you were at that? Yeah, a few of you. Great. So let's start there. When it comes to screenwriting, I think an important question to just kind of start with is films that you enjoy, scripts that you enjoy reading. What do you gravitate towards? And I'm going to treat this like a college lecture because that's what I do. So I'm going to talk question and answer. So if you are shy, lose that. Let's have fun. Let's have a discussion today. So when you approach a film that you really enjoy, what are you connecting to? Do you connect to the story? Do you connect to the character? Character, okay. How many of you connect to the story? Okay, Frank. Why do you connect to story?
That's our job.
That's our job. Okay.
The stories so the characters are so the stories like a whole thing with all the themes and things that you can like connect to like whatever. And also Aristotle says plots first.
Aristotle says plot first. Okay. I see a hand back here.
I've always been a story person.
Okay, why?
I love stories, and when I'm watching a movie, it's great if there's some famous actor, but it doesn't have to be a famous actor for me, and as long as they're doing their job, I don't care. I care about the story, what happens.
I think you're right. I mean, I think it's let's be honest, it's a little bit of a trick question, right? You can't really have a story without characters that are interesting, that are intriguing, that are three-dimensional, but you really can't have a good story without characters that are enjoyable to watch, that you want to go with them. Today, what I'm going to kind of talk about is character, right? I believe character-driven plot is a really fun way to access kind of the screenwriting process. Now, some people are going to decide on what the story is first, and they're going to move forward from that. Some people are going to create these characters that they want to work through, and basically put them into different scenarios. But if we start from this very simple concept, right? Every great play, film, musical, book, well, maybe not a book, but it's going to start with a script, right? Every great script is going to start with a story. Every great story is going to start with a concept, something that we could ask maybe, what if this happens, right? What if this happens? What if that? But why? Why do you decide on what you want to write about? How many of you have written a script in here before? When do you find yourself most successful when you're in the screenwriting process? I've written several scripts, some that have finished and some that haven't, right? What is it about the ones that I start that I maybe get 20 pages in, 30 pages in, and I just get stopped? What is it that I can't access what I actually want to write about? What works for you all when you're working through a story, when you're really passionate about the script that you're writing? Yeah.
I like to take long walks and listen to music while I imagine the script and the scenes, and if it doesn't work while I'm on the walk and with the music and anything like that, then it doesn't work when I write it down.
Okay, I like that. Yeah, Eugene.
Whenever I start writing and I start to feel like the characters take over the scenes and kind of write their own path from there, is whenever I start feeling that. If I don't feel that that's there, that's whenever I kind of lose that momentum.
I think that's great. Yeah. Yeah.
I take like a model, so I studied like Save the Cat, right?
Yeah.
Okay, my plot points are on these pages, and so I write to those plot points with the overarching storyline. And so I think for me, when I hit a plot point, I'm like, okay, I can take a break, refresh, look over everything, and then move. Okay, connect it to the next, and then review.
I think that's great. I mean, such an important part of the writing process is the rewriting process, right? And then the rewriting process, and then the rewriting process from that to really like cut in on what you want to get at. I think what Eugene, right? I think what Eugene was saying here is great, right? Like you find a character and you want to follow them through the scenarios that you put them through, right? To me, it is about character. All story comes from character. screenwriting professor that I had, Scott Myers is his name. He teaches at DePaul, but he runs the blog that is the Blacklist official screenwriting blog. Go into the story. Maybe some of you have heard of it. He professes by the idea that all narrative conflict comes from a character's journey from disunity into unity. And I think actors kind of approach characters in the same way. What is feeling, where does the disunity come from within a performance, right? That's kind of our arc, our character arc to get to the end of the film. Disunity can come from any various number of things. It can be something traumatic that happened to a character early on. It can be a relationship, it can be a job, it can be any aspect of their life, but what is driving this character's journey towards feeling just balance, right? And it's kind of a very human way of approaching characters. All of us are dealing with a whole host of things in our lives right now, but we're all just trying to get back to a place where we feel balanced. Maybe in times that we're feeling anxious, what is it that's making us feel anxious? How do we approach life to get us to a place where we are just calm, we're balanced, we're feeling it out? And characters, much the same way, right? In a screenplay, a character is what they do. We want characters to be active, right? We want them to be the ones that are driving the story. And as much as we want actors to know our characters, as writers, arguably, we need to know our characters more than anyone else, at least at the very beginning of the process, right? Because as a writer, you're kind of creating this whole world. You're creating this world, you're putting the characters that you're creating into this world. You're in control of everything. If you as a writer do not know who your character is, who does? Right? So once you work through that process, it becomes how do you reveal this character in a way that is interesting to an audience that is either reading the script or an audience that is watching the film. And then there's a whole nother layer to this, which is that the script you write, 99% of an audience that's going to engage with your script is never going to read the script. They're engaging with the performers that are going to bring that character to life once the project has been made. And I'll talk to you a little bit about that towards the end, but let's work through just the process of building out a character so that it is someone who is believable. I'm a firm believer in characters that feel real. Even if they're non-human characters, there still needs to be a humanity to them. There needs to be a human aspect that somebody is connecting to. So it all comes from a character's interior life and some of the choices that we make about what that is. So let me ask, what is interior life? What do I mean by that? Harley, I think you're a student, you should know this. Yeah.
What do you mean in terms of like the whole of their interior life or the inequity situation you were describing earlier?
The whole, just what does interior life mean?
The aspects between their security and their insecurities?
It's close. PG?
The subtext of what the story truly means to them.
Close-ish, yeah. I'm getting a little technical here. Dan?
The motivation of the character.
Motivation, and it all comes from like one thing, which is how did this character become who they are? Right? So when I talk about interior life, what I'm talking about, Harley, what am I saying when I say interior life? That's okay. You actually didn't take screenwriting with me, so you're forgiven. Interior life. Let's say your character on page 1, 25-year-old human being, right? Interior life is going to refer to all of that 25 years that came before this character arrives on page 1 of your screenplay. And that's really important to think about as a writer. Think about yourself in this room right now. Frank, are you comfortable saying how old you are? Yeah, that's fine, that's fine. Give or take a couple decades. Yeah, here, I'll say it. I'm 35 years old, right? Everything you see in front of you right now is 35 years of experiences. That has led me to this point, being in front of you right now on page 1 of a screenplay, right? So everything that I am has been created through 35 years of memories and experiences that you all will know nothing about. But the things I say likely developed from maybe the first time I gave this lecture, who knows, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. And I've continued to work on it, continued to process what are the things that connect to an audience. So characters in a screenplay, you need to approach them like yourself, right? If you have a 20-year-old character, what are the 20 years of experiences that have created them as they are? We talked a little bit about the disunity into unity, but really what it comes down to is who is this person and how did they become who they are? And that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about interior life. It's your character from birth until the beginning of the screenplay. And if we're going to break that down into questions, what are the emotional forces that are at play with your character? You all probably know characters like this in your lives, right? You probably know somebody who is toxically positive. And if you don't, hello, I'm Steve Kniss. That's my fatal fault. You probably know trusting characters, suspicious characters, but how did they become who they are? Those similar motivations, it's on you to bring that into the characters that you create and the screenplays that you write. So I've got some questions that I like to ask. And this can be done through your own research. Google what are good questions that you should ask about your characters. But first and foremost, how old are they when the story begins? I think my bio mentioned a short film that I did called Rear View. That is about a dad dealing with the loss of his wife, interacting with his 6-year-old daughter. 6 years old ended up being a really important thing to that because that, like, through my own research, 6 to 7 years old, that's when the idea of the permanence of death starts to become clear to a child. So the conversations in that film, how do you explain death to someone who has no really understanding of what death is? So how old are they when the story begins? Well, I'm dealing with a 6-year-old child. I now have a kid who has passed 6. He's now 7 years old. At the time that I wrote it, I did not have kids. So how do I still build a realistic experience to make sure that that child is real? I had not experienced what it was like to be a dad by that point. So how do I build in those very real experiences of what it is to parent when you don't know what it is to parent? Being a writer is all about being able to research, being able to learn. Another thing that I think is really important to just building in who your character is where do they live and where have they lived? Harley, you know me. Where am I from? I'm from Chicago. How proudly do I wear that badge of honor? Yes. To know me is to know that I am born and raised in Chicago, and to know anybody, it should be your goal in life to meet someone who loves you as much as Chicagoans love to tell people that they are from Chicago. All right? Yeah, Frank, you know. So, me being from Chicago, that's a big part of me becoming who I am. A character that grows up in a rural area, gonna probably have a different experience than a character that's grown up in an urban environment. How does that affect how they approach life? How does that affect how they approach any setting, any conversation that they have, right? The goal here is to build 3-dimensional characters. Another question that I'm gonna ask, are they an only child or do they have siblings? My parents happen to be here right now, so I'll pick on you all. You have 2 kids. One is my older brother. How did my older brother change when I was born? A lot. yeah, a lot. So, he got pretty protected. That's nice. I've not experienced that, but that's nice, yeah. So, older brother started out as an only child. My brother is 5.5 years older than me. Probably would have been a different person had I not been born. All of a sudden, he becomes the older brother, maybe protective, and that's going to make a difference with who he becomes as a now 40-year-old person, right? So, only child, siblings, important questions that you can ask yourself. What are the things that made me into the person that I am today? How do I bring this into just building out a character? Remember, we haven't even started our script yet. Oh, I forgot the relationship with the parents. We don't need to talk about that one. What was their childhood like? I think that's a huge one. I am who I am because of my childhood. How many of you can point to like very specific memories from your childhood that you still kind of hold with you today that kind of created who you are as a person? I'm not going to call on you to share those. Those are for you. It's not for anybody else. And this is the fun part, is as a writer, all of this backstory, nobody ever has to know. But this is so important for you as a writer when it comes to actually building believable characters that are real people. So you go through their life pre-screenplay, and you build an entire collection of experiences because, again, if you do not know your character, who does? All right? You should be able to answer any questions about them because if you know how they developed, this is the key to narrative conflict. This is the key to bringing story out. You know how they're going to deal with the action of the film. If you know how they became who they are, you know the sort of obstacles to put in front of them that's going to create some sort of interesting story. All right? Let me have a volunteer. Great, thank you for raising your hand. What's your favorite kind of ice cream? Why? Because it's plain. Why do you like connect to plain ice cream?
Because like, if it has too much stuff in it, then I feel like it's too much.
It's too much. It can get overwhelming. I just feel like I learned so much of you, so much about you just by asking you what your favorite ice cream is. We're about to enter Thanksgiving, right? How many of you like pie versus cake? Pie, okay. What is a favorite type of pie? Pecan pie, why? Because it's really good? That's okay, we don't have to dig too deep into
I
it.
mean, it's sweet, it's got a little bit of that crunch, and then the gooey feeling when it's really warm, that's good pie.
Okay, how do you start to feel when you like smell pecan pie? Happy and hungry. For me, for Thanksgiving, for me it's apple pie, and I think that's because I have like memories of baking apple pie with my mom. And that becomes a really nostalgic experience. And I'm sure it's something that she learned from her mom, and it gets passed down from generations. These are really mundane details, right? These are mundane preferences. And yet, if you dig deep into it, all of a sudden, what you know about your character explodes. All right? You start to learn who this person is inside and out so that you know what are the obstacles, what are the conflicts that is going to create something interesting. Do you have favorite music? I think that's a big one too. What is your music? What does your character's favorite music say about them? Question I love to ask about characters, sorry. Do they blush? What makes them blush? I don't know. It's up to you all to figure that out. So you've done this sort of work. You've gone through questionnaires, and there are tons of like biographical questions you can ask. This comes down to like writing a character bio and building out a long document, if you want, that says everything about here is how your character went from day one to page one of a screenplay. And then we get into a character's exterior life. So if interior life is everything up to page one of a screenplay, what do I mean by exterior life? What happens? Yeah, pretty much everything from page 1 to, let's say 90. We're making a short feature film. We want to make something that people want to go see. So, exterior life. This is going to take place during the world of the script, essentially. We break it down into 3 components, right? Your professional life, your personal life, and your private life. Again, if we approach this as just thinking about it from our own lens of us as human beings, we can break down our own lives in these 3 aspects, right? My professional life, I teach full-time as assistant professor at Western Carolina University. I write and direct films, usually over summer break, because that's when I can get away. But that's my professional life. That's stuff that I'm getting paid to do. That is my work, even though the film part, let's be honest, much more enjoyable than the teaching part. Close your ears, students that are in the room. My personal life, I am married. I have 2 young kids, 7 years old and 4-year-old boys. They are chaotic at all times, as boys tend to be. That's my personal life. Finally, we get around to a character's private life. What do you do when you're alone? I probably wake up every morning, 6 a.m., 7 a.m., something like that, get kids ready to go to school, drive to work, come home, pick kids up. Maybe we're making dinner. Maybe we're watching something on a screen that I can't engage with. Maybe we're going through all of that. Finally, the kids go down. Usually my wife falls asleep with one of the kids. Finally, I am left alone for the first time all day. It's 9 p.m. at night. What do I do? What do I do with my personal life or my private life? Typically, probably gonna watch a movie. Finally, I can watch something that I can't watch around my 7-year-old. My 4-year-old probably still young enough that I can get away with some of those, I don't know, Godfather watches, but those 3 aspects of my life determine who I am in front of you right now. So I've had those 35 years of experiences that have created the person that's in front of you. And now just the day-to-day, my professional life, my personal life, and my private life. I'm probably way more comfortable speaking in front of you right now than I was 5 years ago, because I do this on a day-to-day basis now. So by working through a character's exterior life, again, now we're thinking about how did they become who they are, and now who are they right now? And that's a screenplay. Okay, how did your character become who they are, and how are they going to respond to the things that you put in front of them? So how do we develop an interesting character? How do we develop a good character? Well, first and foremost, characters have to be active, right? We want them to act. We don't want them to react. Why do we want that? This is an easy one. What was the question?
You can relate to them more, it's more engaging.
You can relate to them more, it's more engaging. Yeah.
If they're only reactive and they don't actually have their own personality and character outside of the other characters in the story, so no kind of like.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. I think some reaction is fine, but you want your main characters to be a driving force. Dan, I'll pick on you since I know you're an actor. Do you prefer to play characters that are passive, or do you prefer to play characters that are actually making choices? That's a cop-out. But no, you're right. You're totally right. You're totally right. You have to have an objective. Any movie we watch is action, right? It's things that are happening in front of us. It's present tense. Formatting, we're writing scripts in present tense because things need to happen. Otherwise, I mean, what's the point? Why are we writing this? Why are we making this? Again, we go back to the idea that 99% of audiences that engage with your work are not going to actually read your script. It's about watching the movie that is made from your script. So until you actually go through that process and build something that is interesting for an audience to watch, it's just words on a paper. I don't like thinking about it that way because it's so much work, right? Scripts are hard. Scripts are really hard to write, especially when you get into the kind of feature length aspect of things. But characters need to have a strong and defined dramatic need, right? Or super objective. What is driving them? What is their spine? They have to have an individual point of view. And very importantly, they need to change. They need to go through some kind of transformation. It doesn't have to be, I am scared of this and now I'm not scared of this anymore, right? It doesn't have to be something that is so black and white. It can be subtle, but you still want your character to be different at the end of the script than where they start at the beginning of the script, right? Our character arc. Pretty simple. Getting into basics here. We talk about the character arc or the dramatic need. What does your main character want to win, gain, or get, or achieve during the course of your screenplay? Think about anything that you do in life, right? Let's talk about any sort of test. Do a mental exercise with me right now. We're back in, let's say, 4th grade. That feels like when it's a good pop quiz time. You've just sat down in a classroom. A teacher has come up and said, it's pop quiz time. I hope you have been paying attention in lectures, and you've got this quiz that is in front of you. What are our 3 outcomes that can come from that? What's that? You can pass the test, okay? You can fail the test. You can skip the test. You can pull the fire alarm so you never have to take the test, right? Those 3 options, hopefully, are going to be the types of answers that your characters, that these really well-written characters that I know all of you are going to write, answer. Give me the last one. You can cheat, but you might pass still. Or maybe you'll get caught and you'll fail. But now we're getting into the gray area of what those choices can look like. It is an option. So you ask your characters questions, you create this conflict in front of them, you give them these choices. Will I pass? Will I fail? Will I cheat? Will I skip? Will I break the law to get out of class right now? Those sorts of things, these choices that your character makes that completely comes from the spine that you've built for your character, that is what is going to drive these characters through the storyline, right? That's going to be their purpose, their mission, and their motivation. Now, with all things, simplicity over complexity usually helps your writing out. I see you nodding, Frank. Keep things simple, right? Stories do not have to be the most complicated story in the world. Now, they can be, right? And you'll connect with it, but simplicity is going to be something that we connect with. So ideally, when you're building in what a character's dramatic need is or their motivation, you can define that in a few words or less, or a sentence. Something that is simple. What is the one thing that is driving your character forward? And this gets back to that kind of disunity into unity idea. Now, a character can have lots of different wants, right? I want to pass the test. But a character should really only have one need. What is that really internal thing that is driving your character forward? It comes a test, pass, fail, pretty surface, right? Surface level objectives. I need to make my father proud. That's something that's a little bit more internal. That's going to drive me to study. That's going to drive me to work as hard as I can. So when the pop quiz comes, I'm ready to ace it because I've dealt with this really, really internal motivation that's going to push me through my story. A character without a clear objective is going to frustrate your audience. It's also probably going to frustrate your actors when they're reading the script. You want to define those objectives as much as you can, and it has to be simple, and it has to be in the script, because you're not always going to be able to talk to actors that are reading your script. Maybe you're going to option your script out, and someone else owns it now. So you've lost a little bit of the context that you can provide. Hopefully they'll still involve you in that process, but that's not a guarantee. So how do you get that into the script so that all of that is still being communicated? And this is the challenge of writing a screenplay with three-dimensional characters, with a story that is going to continue through and hold your audience's attention. So we get into character change, right? How does your character change throughout the story? Who are they at fade in? And I'll just go through these various questions here. Again, it's kind of a summary here. It's okay if you have some passive characters, but then they become active, right? That's their character arc. We've probably all seen a movie where a character can't do anything, doesn't want to make a decision. Maybe you could argue that the film Last Night kind of dealt with that as well. But they become more active, they start to make those choices, and that becomes their character arc, right? The dramatic need is going to drive our characters forward. The obstacle that we choose to place in front of our characters is where the narrative conflict is going to come from. And then where just the enjoyment of the story, those of you who connect with story, is going to come from, is going to be cheering for these characters to overcome that obstacle. And then to overcome the next obstacle. And then to overcome the next obstacle, and hopefully, by the end of the day, get back to this place of unity where they are balanced. Because that's all we're kind of striving for day to day as human beings, is just being a little bit better tomorrow than we were today. Now, after you've gone through this entire process, you've written this script, you feel really good about these characters, I'll talk a little bit about the process that I did on my most recent feature film, which, if you have not seen it, you can go back in time 6 hours and watch it at Tryon Theater at 11 a.m. this morning. Or you can talk to me about it. I'll show you a scene in a little bit, or go watch the trailer. In that process, my creative partner and I had written a few features that were to the point where they were probably a little bit more expensive than we could finance ourselves. And so we wanted to start pitching ourselves as co-directors. So our thought to that was, okay, well, let's co-direct something, right? We want to make stuff. We want to get our name out there. So we want to make a feature. Screw it, let's write a feature that we can finance ourselves, that we can co-direct ourselves. So we have to write it for as cheaply as it can possibly be made. So what are some things that we might take into account if we want to make a feature film for really cheap, that we're paying for ourselves? Locations, great. So limited locations. What else? Was that? Script length, sure. No VFX, kids, or pets. Check, check, check. Yeah, that's correct. No crowd scenes, that's right. This is good. All of your pros. So, Never Not Yours came out of that, originally titled Adult Children, but it's a cast of five family members, all going to their parents' cabin, where the events take place over one weekend. And things happen, but we don't need to get into all of that right now. As part of building this production process, we originally envisioned, okay, let's do something that is hybrid scripted, hybrid improvised, because that's going to allow us to be a little bit nimble on set. It's going to get the actors really involved in that process. And what it really turned into was sort of by accident, hybrid scripted, hybrid workshop. It was as if we were creating devised theater. And I'll tell you how that happened. So we luckily, we did not run auditions for this film. We had four of the five actors we had worked with previously. We knew and loved. We sort of wrote for them and knew that they would buy into the process and enjoy kind of the experimental aspect of the storytelling that we were doing. Our fifth character came to us word of mouth to another actor that we talked to. Do you know anybody that you think would work for this? So the five actors that came to us, no auditions. We got lucky that they all said yes. As part of this process, we had about 30 pages of a script written. Just the first 30 pages that we sent around said, look, this is kind of what is going to happen. Do you want to help us out? And we started having coffee with them. We started getting to have more conversations with them. And the idea came to us from actually the fifth actor who we did not cast initially, and said, you know what, I think it would be really helpful if you would create just a questionnaire to send to us. And so we did. And some of our actors really liked it. Some didn't and thought, well, what is this acting 101 bullshit? I don't want to do this. Like, just give me a script. Let me learn my lines. Let me build in my character. And then that one who didn't like it ended up taking it more seriously than everybody else. So we gave each actor roughly 15 to 20 questions and asked them to answer it as their characters. Some really more intensive questions, like what was the maddest you were at your brother? Tell me about the family vacations that you used to go on. Some more surfacey, what's your favorite snack? What's your favorite curse word? Things like that. And then we invited them into the rehearsal process. So we got these 5 questionnaires back. Those of you who have seen the film, not surprisingly, the character who plays the dad sent us like 1-sentence answers for everything, and that kind of matches the character that he plays in the film. The one who wasn't trustworthy of the process, who plays the older brother, sent us like a 20-page document, long, multi-paragraph answers, huge stories about recalling all of these events. And so the rehearsal process on this, and this is getting a little bit inside baseball-y, but we were allowed to do this because we were also on to co-direct. And I'm always a little bit careful about telling writers you should go direct your own films, but find what works for you. Everybody has a process that works best for themselves. So we invited we had Zoom rehearsals, we went into production sort of towards the tail end of the pandemic. And so we held rehearsal over Zoom. I believe we had 5 different Zoom rehearsals. It's 3 adult siblings and 2 parents. And so we met with them in different groupings. We had an initial meeting with all 5 of them. We had a meeting with the dad and the 2 sons. We had a meeting with the mom and the daughter. And then we had a meeting with the siblings and a meeting with the parents. And one by one, we chose which of our questions are most important to work through. And so by going through this process, what we ended up doing was we built this shared history between this family, between these 5 actors. And even within that shared history, what we also inadvertently did, we built in all of these secrets, which definitely added to the creation of the world. The siblings, through things that they talked about, had their own shared history that the parents had no idea about, and vice versa. And that's true of everything, right? My brother and I, we probably have secrets that we haven't shared with my parents. Sorry, mom and dad. All families are that way. And so by inviting them into the process, they started to really engage with the characters that we had in mind and started to give us ideas as to, oh, you know, I think this would be a good idea for where my character should go, or the arc that my character should go on. Or, you know, I would love to have a scene with my dad where we can kind of work through this conflict that you have built for us. And some of that feedback we listened to, some of that we didn't. But by doing that, what we were really doing was a new work, play. And the 7 of us, me and my co-writer and then the 5 actors, were really creating this story together. So I'm going to show you a clip of kind of what I mean. There's a clip from the very initial Zoom rehearsal we had where I think we had asked about a conflict between mother and daughter.
Yeah. I think
left her alone because
I think I can be really tough.
Yeah.
Parent,
Yeah.
but not abusive. Not
No. But I mean, like, you don't, I mean, I like sensitivity. It just takes like one word and you carry it for the rest of your life, being like, what did my mom mean when she said that thing to me when I was in the 7th grade? Does she not like me? But like, and so just,
I think
we carried the deepest wounds from our families, just trying to tell us that they love us in ways that aren't necessarily the same language.
So by this time, we probably had about a 60, 70-page script. It was starting to take shape, but we were able to just take chunks out of these Zoom rehearsals and just plug them into the script. So we get something like this.
I don't know, it's funny. All it takes is like one thing and we carry it for the rest of our lives. Like, what did mom mean when she said that thing to me in the 7th grade? Does she not like me? I think the deepest wounds we carry are just our families trying to tell us they love us in ways that aren't necessarily the same language.
Have you always been this smart?
Yeah, I have.
And so by going through this process, all of a sudden, one of our actors in the moment answering these questions had basically given us the entire thesis to our film. And this scene sort of plays towards the end of the film. We screened it for cast and crew back in, I think, April or May for the first time just a few months ago. And Angela, who plays Ellie, right there, no memory of this. So it's great writing, right? Like, we can just steal from our actors and put it into the script. No, we gave a ton of credit to her. And now we were recently reviewed by a blog in St. Louis because we screened at the festival there. And the review commented specifically about this line as being this one of the more profound things they'd heard about families in a feature film. And again, it's not something that we wrote. It's something that we invited collaborators into the process, and all of us kind of built that together. And I think that's really what I want to get at here, and I'll break off for questions here in about a minute. By creating 3-dimensional characters and then inviting your actors into that process, you create something that's real. And that's really what our whole goal as artists should be, is to kind of bring light to the humanity that is inside all of us. And so this film deals with drama between family members, but it is about getting to a place at the end of the film where the 5 characters can kind of look at one another and see each other as these really important aspects of who they are and why they are the way that they are and who they've become. Now, not every script is going to work out this way. I think the process that we worked through happened to work for that story. I think an entirely different story probably wouldn't work with that process, and maybe it should just come down to the screenplay. But whether you are writing something alone, whether you are co-writing, whether you're collaborating with others, we want a good story But the key to get to that place is to build in characters that we just can't wait to get to learn more about. All right? And with that, I'll break off into questions. I think we got about 10 minutes left.
So would you say this was an ensemble movie?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
and, because I didn't pick up on a central character, I saw them this morning.
Yeah.
Thank you, and.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so this quote was definitely something that came out at me, but I didn't feel, I felt like that drove a lot of the arc, at least for the three siblings.
Yeah.
And all working through that.
Yeah.
I thought it was amazing and really mature writing too. So when I asked you what the motivation for the film was, it seemed like it could be something very personal, but.
And I think you're right, but I think it's also personal to everyone that was involved in the film. And I kind of answered that with my answer there as well. But even beyond, and this got down to the production of it, so we only had a crew of 7, including the 2 directors. And we asked each of our crew members to bring something that was a nostalgic item from their childhood to bring in the cabin, since we knew we were all going to be living together, making this movie together. So all of a sudden, the crew then started to take ownership of the world that was being created as well. And I think that's a huge aspect of just getting people to buy into the process and the story that you're trying to tell. Is just what's more important than somebody being able to look at something and saying, that's from me, right? That's a piece of me. And I don't think it just has to come from a director or an actor or a writer. I think all of us, a really well-made production is going to take a little piece of everyone that is part of that creation. We did, yeah. By the time we landed on set, yes, we did. We had I think I could bring it up. I think it's 100 pages thereabouts, and that is in the script. So yeah, they were memorizing the line that they had said through a Zoom several months before that we had put into the script. 2 or 3 of the scenes in the film are still improvised, and I can tell you later which scenes those are. But for the most part, it was structured out. Yeah.
Yeah, so one thing that I always value whenever writing is subtext. And sometimes I've noticed, like in particular drafts or just particular projects overall, sometimes either the subtext is too cryptic and too hidden, or sometimes it's trying to be too blatant and sometimes gets mixed up too much with the text itself. What are some examples of times where you've had to find the proper balance of such, and do you kind of have, I don't know, mixtures and rules of how you want to properly keep that in balance?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think some of it comes to me directing most things that I write. So I kind of know the subtext already. One of the most freeing things that I do in the process of creating a film is cutting dialogue in post-production. Maybe even a little bit in pre-production as well. But I think the most interesting an actor looks on screen is when they're listening to something else that's being given to them. And so even cutting across dialogue, cutting against dialogue, can help bring out some of that subtext. The films that tend to bother me are the ones that cut on every single line. This person talks, now this person talks, now this person talks. I don't want to blaspheme because I know we've got actors in the room, but I do think the process of acting is easier when you're speaking. I think it's a lot more difficult when you have to respond to what is being given to you. And so finding actors that can listen and can listen effectively, I think helps bring that subtext out. I think in terms of subtext that might not be communicated as much against subtext that is too over-communicated, try to do away from that. I would much prefer something that is under-communicated, because then it also comes to the actor to provide that subtext. Again, that's part of the collaboration of building in a believable character.
I would say that in terms of the screenwriting scope, you're focusing just more on the text and more underparring it and hoping that the directors are, if it's a different person, are able to.
Yeah, I think you run the risk of getting a little bit expositional if you're going to overdo the subtext. I think parentheticals are super important to get that subtext across, but I think you can also overdo them. And so I think waiting to utilize that tool until it really is important, and that's the moment that you need that subtext to come through, I think that can help the reading of that character as well. Does that answer your question?
That's great.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
You know, you brought up a really great thing about just finding your characters with your actors and collaborating, because you offer totally surrendered, you know, what you've written. But did you ever find that when you were rehearsing, it was, you knew what you wanted, you got what you wanted, but then you got to the location, you're about to shoot, and it just wasn't working yet?
Yeah, yeah, of course. What production hasn't had that happen? Yeah, yeah, and I think that's part of getting. Okay, so my co-director says this all the time, that really good production, all the pre-production we do is just so we can improvise when we're on set. When things go wrong, and things are going to go wrong on set, things may not translate the same from dialogue to actual performance, right? Maybe words sound terrible when they're finally being spoken out loud. I think like the if you have put in the work in pre-production and built in, this is what this scene is supposed to do, this is what this relationship, this is where it's supposed to be in this moment, when things go wrong, the sort of conclusions that you come to, the way to solve those issues, it's still going to abide by all of this context that you have built into it through the script or through the rehearsal process. So ideally, when you're responding to crisis, you're still doing so that is subconsciously still abiding by everything, all the work that you've put into it up to that point. Does that answer the question, Kyle?
No, I just wanted to know, yeah, how you work with it. And, you know, did you make a lot of discovery, did you find out more about the family as you were shooting?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, again, this is kind of a unique production. I think part of that discovery process was the fact that we were all living together. So we were also kind of becoming a family of 12, and I think that was coming through the camera as well. Ben.
As a writer / director, when you're writing a script, how much of your mindset is going towards like cinematography and the more technical elements of filmmaking?
None of it. No, some of it. But I don't like, for me personally, and this is probably a personal thing, I do not like reading camera directions within a script. I do think that there is that aspect of writing a script. Obviously, again, it's just words on a paper until somebody goes to make it. But I think it's something that you get better at the more you do it, to imply camera directions without saying camera tilts up or camera pans right and follows movement into the room. Yeah, I mean, I think like it still has to read like a story. And that's part of the challenge that we have, is like things that we're writing, we want to sell or we want people to make it. And so we still have to write something that is really, that whoever's reading it can envision it. And so they're playing out the movie in their mind as well. But how do we do it in a way that still doesn't get too technical and allows your reader to kind of pull out of this whole world that you've created for them? Any other questions? How much time? 1 minute? Okay. One more question. Yeah.
When you were filming this movie and like writing it, do you find you were kind of writing as you went along with filming, or did you finish?
So we finished the writing first, but I think because of that process, we were a lot more flexible on set, changing things. I am probably more aggressive than most writers in allowing my dialogue to change. I tend to overwrite scene description, so I love that, but I'm less in love with my dialogue. I also think as you invite your actors into the process, they're going to be able to take the line of dialogue that you've written and put it into their words as the character that you've written them to be. So I think being really flexible once you're on set and allowing your actors, if the performance becomes stilted because they're tripping up over the words that you've written, then change them, because that's going to hurt the film a lot more than holding tight to your words at the end of the day so that they can kind of say something in something that's more comfortable. Cool, let's wrap it up there. All right, thank you, everyone.